Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of the Back to the TARDIS podcast, the podcast where we take a look at every single episode of the 2005 revival of BBC's Doctor Who. I'm Jeff.
Hello, I'm Skylar.
And I'm Karkat fucking Vantis.
And this week, we are discussing Series 7, Episode 1, Asylum of the Daleks by who else but Stephen Moffat. Now, with this episode, I've watched this episode twice recently. First time, absolutely fucking hated it. Second time, I think it has some neat ideas, but I think it kind of stumbles on all of them, but I will still admit that it is not overall, I think, as bad as some of the ARC shit from last year.
Pretty much nailed.
And I'd say it's a little bit better than last time. A little bit. I still don't like it, though.
Pretty much nailed my fucking opinion on it. I think going into it, I was really down because I remembered what they did with the Daleks, and last week's episode left... Well, not last week's. You know what I fucking mean. That episode left a bad taste in my mouth. But, overall, neat concepts, some neat scenes and moments, but overall... not great, but a better outing than last time.
Yeah. I will go as far to say as this episode is flawed, but somewhat good. It's definitely messy. It's I wouldn't say it's messy. I would say I don't like some of the directions it goes, but everything it does, I feel, is executed competently enough that I was like, okay, you know what, this is kind of stupid, but it's not like destroying my experience or whatever. You know, just like the possession eye stock thing, I was like, this is kind of a dumb idea, but I think it's used well enough that not that irked by it.
Here's my thing with the sleeper Dalek shit, and the fact that they keep doing this kind of pisses me off. It feels entirely antithetical to the way that Daleks work.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it is another case of Moffat thinking up, oh, what if I scared the kids by having this fucking eye stalk pop out of their forehead? That'll fucking shock little Timmy from Guilford hard, without actually thinking about, like, hey, wait a second, this is kind of stupid, actually. And all the, because they do this throughout the episode, they do that, like, the idea of being converted into the Dalek, all these things. That's not how they work. They don't do that. Even the fact of there being this asylum because they don't want to kill such perfect hatred doesn't make any sense, because how many times has a Dalek plot been resolved by getting to pit two groups of Daleks against each other because each one thinks it's more pure than the other?
Well, that I could buy, because to my memory they've only done that when there's genetic impurities, and if these are pure Daleks but they're just quote-unquote insane, I could see them still thinking that. But
yes, because fascism is very tolerant of the mentally disabled.
Yeah, it's messy. I had two thoughts about the Daleks in this episode. First of all, with the stealth sleeper agents, I was just like, I can't believe I'm thinking this, but Chibnall's special recon Daleks are a much more effective and lore friendly version of this thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Reconnaissance units make sense. That is something that makes sense and is still quantifiably a Dalek. Sleeper agents? No. Not at all. That's not how they work.
I was also thinking there's several changes to Dalek lore that there's first of all, there's these sleeper agents. Second of all, they're not... Well, I don't know if they never mentioned that they're not on Skaro before, but they're not on Skaro, and there's a parliament now.
Well, of course they're not on Skaro. Fucking Seven goaded Davros into blowing it up however many years ago.
Right, so yeah, there's that, and there's a parliament now, and there's a prime minister. I think if there was more...
Is that supposed to be political commentary? If so, it doesn't feel like it's executed very well, and if not, why the fuck is it a parliament?
Yeah, exactly. I think you could have, if they just spent time saying, this is a new Dalek paradigm, that this is why there are certain things that are done differently, and they like explain the ideology, but they don't really.
They don't want to mention that because it'll remind everyone of that episode that they made that nobody liked.
Yeah. I like this episode better than that one, don't get me wrong.
Slightly, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know, it was just like several ideas that were just like, okay, I can see what you were going for, but you didn't really put in the work, but like, there's still enough of it there that I'm just like, well, okay, I guess, you know? I don't know. Aside from the sleeper agents, I was willing to like accept a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so, like, you're totally right. A lot of this is, like, okay, this, like, doesn't fit with the Daleks. I personally just, I don't know. I was like, okay, this can just be, like, I'm just gonna consider this to be non-canon almost, just, like, or I don't want to go into, like, weird shit about, like, oh, canon, whatever, but just, like, if I, like, turn down my, like, rigidity on, like, what things are supposed to be a bit, and just, like, let this be its own story without taking too much into like what Daleks are or whatever, then I was like fine with it. I think it makes for a good story. I think it does clash with, you know, what we've seen from the Daleks and what they're supposed to be and how they're used, but just yeah, it's weird and not the best, but it also works for this episode. And so I think you know, we take this approach a lot of like, okay, this doesn't work with like this broader season or like, you know, this species as a whole, but when I'm looking at it in this one episode, it's good, it's fine, it's whatever. So I think I'm just doing that again this time.
And I think that it ties into the fact of like, this ties into, I think, how they handled the Oswin reveal, which I will say it here. Jenna Coleman is good. I think the fact that her announcement, they did not announce that she was going to be in this episode. They announced that she was going to be there later on in the season, but they didn't say she was going to be in this episode. And the fact that they kept that a secret, that's good. I think the way the reveal was handled of, oh, they needed an intelligence, so they made you into a Dalek. A, that's fucking stupid. The Daleks aren't going to recognize any intelligence that isn't their own. Like, they wouldn't dare recognize that someone who is not Dalek has a greater intelligence than them. B, and here's the other thing, it's too obvious because literally every other human character in the episode that is not the Doctor, Amy, or Rory is already, it's like, oh, they're a Dalek. So it's like, you know, it's like by the time that we get to her, it's like, duh, of course. And it feels like it's a little bit too pleased with itself for how clever it is, even though it's like, dude, you already pulled this same twist 2 times within the episode.
Yeah, I see your point. I don't know if this is damning with faint praise, but the way that Oswin is presented from the beginning to almost the very end until the reveal, it's kind of very, like, traditional, tropey Moffat wife guy, like, Mary Sue-esque, like, bordering on that level of just like, oh, I'm just this clever.
No, she's kind of written cringily, too. I'm not gonna lie. I don't hate Clara at all, but I definitely think there is some places where she's not written the best.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, like, I think the trope works here because I could see, like, if I was, like, going back in time, if I was watching this as an adult, I think I would be, like, expecting, like, oh, this is just, like, a poorly written character that's just able to do all of this because. But when you find out the reason, you're just like, oh, okay, now things make more sense. I'm not saying it's a great character. The line where she's just like, oh, my bisexuality was a phase, not to get all woke, but that was a little, like, eye-rolling. Like, oh, okay, early / mid 2010s representation, I see you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't mind the Oswin character. It's weird knowing what the character of Clara will be and seeing it start out here. It's just odd to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I literally don't remember how this ties into her overall arc, so I'm just like, what the fuck is this bitch doing here? And I definitely agree with what Jeff said, that it was like, that the reveal was like not a reveal, it was very obvious. I was sort of okay with that because obviously, you know, we're watching it knowing the context already, so I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. I think the reveal, like the even if the in-context story was like predictable, I think the actual like technicality of it was all right, so that I was like, okay, yeah, this gets me a bit. So
yeah, and I do at least think the way that like her realizing and dealing with it is written and performed is well done. It's just that there's this smugness about the whole thing that I find kind of annoying, especially considering how clearly it's signposted. It's like, no, you're not as clever as you think you're being.
Yeah.
And it also kind of goes into the whole Clara arc as a whole for this season, where it's like, this isn't as clever as you think you're being. This mystery box shit is kind of annoying. This Impossible Girl shit, fucking, I don't like it. And this is where it starts, and it's fine. The actual Impossible Girl stuff is fine here, but I know that it's going to get more annoying later on.
Oh yeah, when I heard the line, I forget what it is.
The Run You Cover Boy one?
No, not that one. It's much earlier, where she's just like, what's a word for someone who's very clever that's a bit sexy? And then he's like, the doctor. I was just like, oh no, it's already starting.
Yeah, no, or the like the lead in the cold open, where they're like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how fucked are we? And 11 comes in, and I'm like, don't you fucking do it. And they do, and I'm like, eat shit.
Yeah, there's...
Okay, you're gonna hate me for this, but I like that line.
Yes, because you like it when Moffat is a smug bitch to you.
Yeah, like, I think we just gotta accept at this point that we're just known Moffat apologists. We eat that shit up. We're the Tumblr fuckers that, like, that shit was written for, and we eat it like slop.
Yeah, what's next? You coming on next week and being like, I don't know, man, I think the Onceler was pretty hot. Is that what's next, Karkat? Is that what's next?
I mean, you're forgetting that fucking Nomad was at one point partially the Onceler, so I'm just saying.
You just like getting domed by Moffat's writing. It's fine. We all have our crosses to bear.
Wow, is that a joke about my history in a Homestuck? Okay.
Sure. We're doing it live. Yeah, the Impossible Girl shit, that's like a labyrinth. If you thought the River Song shit was weird and convoluted, just you fucking wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if I made my character the most important person in the Doctor's timeline? Haha, unless...
And then Chibnall went, what if I made the Doctor the most important
person in the universe? Ha ha ha! Unless... But
yeah.
see, I will take this moment to once again state that while I am saying Chibnall bad today, I will also once again state that I do think that Recon Dalek idea was actually pretty good. Good idea. I respect it. Chibnall's still bad, though.
True. Do we want to talk about the non-issue that is the melodramatic subplot of the divorce?
Yeah, no, I was going to talk about this too, because here's my thought. If you're going to do this, okay, you know what? Fine. It's an interesting thing to do, and given that this is the first married couple to be in the TARDIS, I think ever, because though there were companions that married after they left, like RTD, the base god, love him, who had fucking Nyssa and Tegan get married or whatever. Like, that wasn't while they were in the TARDIS. So, like, if you're gonna do that, I think that's an okay thing for you to go on. But it needs to take longer than an episode Like,
Yeah.
if this had played out over multiple stories, I'd be like, yeah, this is actually pretty good. And I think that the resolution of it is pretty good. And the way that Arthur Darvill and Karen Gillan play off of each other is, again, still absolutely fantastic and wonderful. The problem is that they crammed all of this into a single episode, so in the same hour that you learn that they're getting divorced, they're already back together.
It reminds me of the Star Trek syndrome. This isn't as much of a problem in modern Trek, but like where you have some like interesting or intriguing change to the status quo, or like a potential change that could take like multiple episodes and multiple arcs and like cool shit to resolve, and then it's just like, well, no, back to business as usual. We need the crew to be in the same shape it was at the start of this episode next week. It's just like, well, okay, then why fucking do it? It takes all the teeth out of it if you don't really feel any consequence. And I was okay with the Doctor eventually like helping quote unquote fix their marriage.
Yeah.
It's very much like evocative of the more like fairy tale-esque vibe of series 5, but like as you said, Jeff, have it fucking take longer.
Yeah.
Like sit in the uncomfortableness of it all. That's a very different dynamic for the couple. I mean, aside from like Amy kissing the Doctor, we haven't really had that level of like angst and turmoil in the relationship for like ever.
Yeah,
and it's like even if like, you know, like we had the stuff with RTD where there was definitely sort of some arcs with companions in their relationship to the Doctor, some more than others. But it kind of feels like with Moffat that kind of goes away, at least except for Clara. And it's definitely gone away now. And I think it is a major pitfall of the writing that it doesn't allow characters to really have any emotional ups and downs with the Doctor anymore, aside from, like, the last example was Clara. But, like, Amy and Rory, like, I guess they do kind of try it there, but they don't... Every time he tried, it didn't really work very well. And even Clara, I'd argue, like, it's generally resolved in the episode that it happened in. And it's like, I feel like this is one of the things of, like, you know, there was that piece in The Guardian about how the show should be taken off the air. And I don't necessarily agree with it, but I also think that if the show isn't going to actually improve and step up its writing game and format and maybe dispense with the status quo in a way that's actually meaningful and interesting instead of just doing lore shit to try and change the lore status quo instead of the actual format and status quo of the show itself, then I think it's fair to say I'm not interested in seeing this anymore. I think it's time for it to die for a bit until someone else, be it the BBC staff who would be in charge of it or a potential showrunner, to come in and redo everything again, because the show hasn't gotten that change since 2005.
I hate to sound like a fucking nerd. Well, you go ahead. You were waiting.
Yeah, I actually forgot what I was going to say first, but just on that note, you know, when you look at some, you know, because you're sort of talking about like innovating, really changing up what the show is like, and you know, we were talking about the example of Star Trek earlier, and that's the thing about like modern Star Trek. It has modernized. You look at Discovery and Picard and all these other things, and they're really like modern shows doing more modern things with like new formats and really experimenting with the seasonal storytelling, and something that still feels decidedly Trek storytelling while also telling these longer stories. And you look at this. Oh, I remember what I was going to say now. You look at this. You look at fucking Amy and Rory fixing their marriage in one episode because, like, I don't know, they just like never understood why they were breaking up. Apparently, like, I guess they just didn't have communication. So, like, I don't know. Like, it just feels
if their communication skills are this shitty, should they really be getting back together? Question mark.
Exactly. That's my thing. Like, okay, you just, like, didn't explain to him that the kids thing was what was holding you up. Like, you just, like, decided that for him. Like, damn, bitch, okay. Like, God.
Like, Rory doesn't deserve your ass if you're gonna fucking throw a fit over that. God.
Yeah,
Don't do that shit.
And just, you know, what you said, like, I wish it had lasted longer, and they literally, like, you know, they have the potential for a really good arc here because they're sort of, you know, effectively kidnapped onto the TARDIS, so it's not like the Doctor is seeking them out after he, like, really made that good decision at the end of season 6. You know, I forgot this is how they got back on the TARDIS, and honestly, I would have been okay with this being a way they get back onto the TARDIS if then they're, like, trying to fix their marriage, and the Doctor's like, okay, well, let's just go back, I'll drop you off, and then the TARDIS keeps taking them to all these fucked up places that helps them work through their shit, and then maybe after that they can finally get off. But they don't do that. They're just like, okay, my marriage is fixed now, and then they just get right back on the fucking TARDIS. So,
like, it kind of feels, I think in general, the thing with Series 7 arc-wise is that this first half, these first 5 episodes, so it's notable that the episode split, a significant chunk of the season is the second part, like more than half of it, technically. But this split means that because Amy and Rory have had this full arc that went through the last 2 seasons and they reached a logical endpoint, means that everything is in a holding pattern for 5 episodes until Amy and Rory get a definitive end and they can move on to what they actually want the arc for the season to be, which is the Clara shit, which I don't even think is good. So it's like, well, we need to do something with them, but also either, like, we don't have enough time or I don't care enough to actually really explore this over a series of episodes, or I don't want to make the other writers have to deal with these constraints or whatever. And it's just like I'm not gonna lie, I think I think the rest of the episodes, like Dinosaurs in a Spaceship, it's all right. Town Called Mercy, yeah, that's pretty good. Power of 3, kind of bad, but it's not entirely Chibnall's fault. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes issues with that one, and I even think Angels Take Manhattan is pretty good up until it isn't, but it's still not enough to escape from the fact that this is a holding pattern until they can get to what they actually want to do. And it's just kind of fucking around for 5 episodes.
Yeah, I don't know. Ideally, this feels like a type of situation where it's like, okay, Rory and Amy have separated from the Doctor. They're no longer, like, traveling companions, but, like, what's next for their relationship? And that question is almost contradictory to the premise in such a way that I'm just like, well, you took away the only interesting thing their dynamic had for this episode. And I like happy endings, as I said. You could end with them back together, or perhaps realizing that, like, I don't know, it's a weird toxicity thing that they're better when they're, like, in danger than when they're not, or some shit. You could do something, but it's just like, you have all these episodes that are, like, for all intents and purposes, filler to the consideration of the overall arc. The fact that the overall arc of this series starts in a Christmas episode, like, I mean, that isn't
no,
bad
it starts
in itself,
here, and then they ignore it for 4 episodes, and then it actually comes back in a Christmas episode, and then actually stays.
Yeah, and just everything they try to carry over from the last series, which, you know, again, isn't completely this series' fault, but also Stephen Moffat, so it's also his fault. The Doctor being like, oh, I got too big, I need to be, like, smaller, and kind of trying to tie this whole thing into the, like, well, the Daleks are only as fascist and as scary as they are in fear of the Doctor, because they had to grow stronger. I'm just like, well, you can't just drop that line. You gotta... You gotta do more with that.
Also, that's fucking stupid! Because, we saw them at like you know what, we could even watch Genesis as our next look at like classic or something, and you can see that Thor and Sarah Jane and Harry were there at the very beginning, and they were just as despicable then, and they hadn't even met the Doctor at that point.
I forget, because I know the Daleks are like introduced in the second fucking story of classic.
That is not their genesis. They were already created at that point. Genesis.
No, I understand that, but yeah. I can't remember if they like recognized the Doctor at that point, because like if he was there at their genesis, then like shouldn't they logically have recognized him then? I know it's a continuity thing, but it's like
yeah.
That was a really random thought. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's So yeah, it's just like ugh, that doesn't even make any sense. And like, what the like, the nanobot thing feels like a callback to like the fucking Empty Child, but it still feels a little bit wonky. And just so they can pull the lol, there's no one actually alive here, it's just a Dalek thing again. And so they can introduce sort of a ticking clock.
Yeah. Again, there isn't enough world building or exposition or like themes interwoven to explain why the Daleks' MO is different. I could even believe that the like if they said like, oh, the asylum is automated, we send all of our like prisoners down there because, you know, real Daleks have better shit to do. I could see them doing that and being like, this is how we keep them enslaved. Yeah. But then I don't fucking like there's no effort. It's just like, oh, this is a cool new thing. Never mind that a stalk popping out of a skull would produce way more blood and shit. Whatever. I'm done.
I'm not gonna lie, like, the other thing is, like, I will say one thing that I think is generally that is genuinely like a good like little writing bit is the one where is the part where you get to the intensive care unit. And it's like, oh, these Daleks are all the ones that survived me. That's good. However, it's in the middle of a shit ton of not good things.
They mentioned a whole bunch of planets and like battles that these
I'm
Daleks
pretty
are
sure
from.
Those are all classic references.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, because I was just like, okay, is this George Lucas pulling world building out of his ass, or is this a reference to something? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's that. As I mentioned, there's the Osmond reveal that I don't think it's handled as well as it could be, even though I think the acting and sort of execution of it after the reveal happens is good. And then it's like, woo, Amy and Rory are back together. Yay. And then we get into another thing, which is, really, what is the point of all of this of like, oh, the Doctor's gone around and has erased himself, and so the Daleks don't remember him now, and a lot of people don't know who he is, and he's anonymous or whatever. What does that really accomplish? Because, like, it's not like the next time the Daleks show up, it's like, we don't know who you are. No, the next fucking time the Daleks show up, it's like, oh shit, it's the Doctor. It's like, if you're going to set up this, and then, like, A, what is even the point of it? And B, you can't even care enough to actually carry out this consequence that you yourself set up.
I think the point is, he's like, oh, I've been laying low, that's why I don't have companions, that's why I don't go on adventures, and now there's the excuse to, sigh, fucking return to the status quo of the regular formula of the show.
But where the show wasn't even in a place where that status quo was brought into doubt. Like, you could maybe make that argument based on the silent ship from the last season, but that arc wasn't even handled great enough. I don't really see why anything that happened in the last season would prohibit the usual status quo from occurring. In fact, I think that's the problem with last season's arc.
True. I don't know what to say. Like, things that are a symptom from last series are clearly hampering the quality, but at the same time, I appreciate enough of the ideas that I was just like, okay, this is like, if I just pretend that I don't know how everything else is going to go, I could consider this an okay start to a series. Like, that's where I'm at. It's just like, this is middle of the road. Like,
yeah,
all right, this is an episode. You said some things, you didn't go through on it well enough, but you know, it's there. There's some pretty good dialogue, pretty good character moments, even if they don't work with the overall tapestry of the show. It's a new series. You got a new intro. Which, by the way, an aside,
sucks.
This is my favorite. This is my favorite intro of the 11th Doctor era. This type of intro where like the logo changes and everything, like for each
it
thing.
just looks like a bad filter and like a weird new texture that they put on the logo. I'm not the biggest fan of it, honestly.
I don't know. Maybe I'm
also,
a cheap bitch.
I think it's like out of sync with the music, which, like, come on.
Well, I didn't pay attention enough to notice that, but maybe Geoff will own me in the marketplace of ideas next time I'll come on.
I know
apologize.
at least either like some of the Capaldi ones are out of sync or they're not consistent.
Yeah,
both of which are wonky.
Could be, but yeah, I guess overall I'm trying to say that this is like, I'm still disappointed, but I still think this is an improvement, and this could just be because this is technically the full first series of Doctor Who I ever watched, though not the first episode. That's another story. I'll get there when we get there. But I don't know. I was just like, meh. This is fine, I guess. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to like, this isn't the greatest episode ever. I think it's about. I think. Okay, this is hard to express, but I think even though it's not like the best episode, it's one that's distinctly like Moffat 11. And I don't think that's necessarily like an inherent like good thing, but I think it's something that our brain notes and is like, yeah, I enjoy this, even if it's not like the best thing ever. We just sort of vibe with the aesthetics and writing style of this sort of 11 Moffat episode. So yeah.
All right, so I guess moving on to ratings, I guess. Yeah, I don't hate it entirely, and I think it's got some good ideas. But that being said, I still don't particularly like it that much, and I think it is indicative of an overall era that, even though I think the casting was pretty good and spot on all around, the general recurring tropes in the writing and the smugness I get from it is really just a turnoff for me, and I don't particularly enjoy it. I think it's a perfectly decent, like, C-.
Basically everything of what Geoff said, I agree with. I think this is a weird transitionary period for Moffat era in that Series 5 was a banger, Series 6 was kind of all over the place, and this is in the weird, like, Series 7A is in the weird spot where he's transitioning from that old, like, I just want to fuck with everybody, into, like, 7B, which has its own issues and its own types of problems that we'll discuss, but for me, I prefer the type of bad that Series 7B is to 7A and Series 6, so it's kind of just like, well, this is fine, I guess. I don't know, it's weird. But I enjoyed myself okay, even, like, even though I was like cognizant of all the problems therein, there was still enough decent stuff to keep me like decently engaged. I didn't mention this in the episode proper, but at least for me, I thought that like Rory had more to do than he usually does.
Oh yeah, Rory's good. Rory's always good, but he's definitely good in this episode. I will 100% say that.
He's a special little boy.
Yeah, so I don't know, there were just some interesting things like that were just like, they're notable. This isn't a top 10 episode by any means. I think off the top of my head, I'd probably watch this series intro over, I don't fucking know, New Earth, series 2. Mm-hmm. That's probably a low bar, but off the top of my head, that's true. Yeah, decent C to C plus.
Yeah, I think it's an episode. It's an episode about the Daleks. It's an okay episode about the Daleks. I think it's a fun romp. I think it's starting to really have Moffat come into his own as like a Doctor Who writer. You know, I think I kind of disagree with season 5 being all that great. You know, we didn't like it as much as you guys did. And you know, we were
You're
mixed on.
You're a fucking insane person. Jesus.
I'm sorry. I don't know. It's just the vibes, you know? We like the vibes better now, even if it's not as well written, you know?
Anyways. Your opinion is valid, but you're incorrect.
Look,
just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. It's not the best written episode, but it's all right, and I like the ideas and the characters and shit. And I'm excited to see how our opinion on Series 7 continues to evolve as we watch it. Cool. 7.5 out of fucking 10.
All right. Well, let's see. We did this. We did Doctor the Widow in the Wardrobe, and we did Wedding of River Songs. So shit. I guess it's time for another look at something that's not the current modern Doctor Who. I'm not entirely sure what that's going to be next, but I'll probably put it on Twitter when we do figure out what that's going to be. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter at B2TARDISPod. You can support us on Patreon for a number of benefits, such as early access to episodes, the ability to listen in live to episodes being recorded, and potentially even the ability to guest star on an episode of your choosing. I'm Jeff. You can follow me on Twitter at WheatleyDL.
Moffat Wifefuckers writes, you can follow me on Twitter at SkyHigh9_5. Thank you for your time.
Fucking Karkat Vantus, don't perceive me.
Can't find him. Don't perceive him. They don't exist.
We'll find you if you do.
Yeah. And we will see you all next week.